expressed that I do love you, I felt like I was telling that to a stranger.
Greg's blowout breakup leaves Katie wanting to go home. We're breaking down all the drama from the Bachelorette hometowns. Hey guys, welcome back to another shared news from home. We have to recap Greg's hometown date, but before we get into it, if you're new here, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell so you don't miss out on any future videos. As always, I'm your host, Gabby, and I'm joined by the awesome Hibba Berry today. 2 words, Greg Grippo. This week's Bachelor episode was all about Greg, but before we rehash everything that went down, Hibba, I have to know, what were your initial reactions about everything from this week's episode?
Oh my goodness, what a freaking roller coaster. I didn't think that this was going to be the result of Greg leaving and leaving on that type of note. We'll obviously dissect it a little bit more when we get there, but man, like what I don't know if I was blindsided, but I just did not expect him to leave on that note. And for Katie's reaction, for his reaction, the way that they just kind of communicated with one another, it was a lot.
It was definitely a lot. We have a lot to unpack here, so let's get right into it. After a long season of men not being here for the right reasons and a few bad breakups already under her sleeve, Katie was down to her top 3 men this week. We had Greg and Justin. So Blake's hometown date went pretty well, even though he didn't say I love you at the end. Hopefully he can recover next week. And then we had Justin's hometown, which was good, but was missing his family, which is kind of a key part of it. But it went well with the friends that he did bring. And then, of course, there's Greg. So before we talk a little bit more about Greg, Hibba, what did you think of Blake and Justin's date? It seemed like they kind of just went, well, good enough, but we were really looking forward to Greg's, which went very well. So what did you think?
Yeah, I mean, the fan favorite definitely has been Greg, so of course they saved his for last, especially with that blowout that followed after. And I think in comparison for Blake and Justin, it was just pretty mediocre. And unfortunately, since Justin's parents couldn't make it to hometowns, I mean, he did have his 2 best friends there, but it just didn't seem to really kind of impact the audience because his parents, who are a key part in hometowns and hometowns in general, they weren't there. And so that was a bit of a letdown, and that kind of just made me check out on Justin and Katie's relationship just a little bit more because, again, from the get go, they didn't really have the strongest connection for him to even make it to the top 3. And then his parents weren't there on top of that, and Katie didn't get to meet his parents. So it kind of just made me put him on the back burner just a little bit more and just shift focus just a little bit more on Blake and Greg at that point. But I think Blake's still went really well. His mom had a great time getting to know Katie as well as his sister. And of course, we'll discuss Blake's hometown visit in a different video. So definitely watch out for that. But as well as for Greg, I mean, again, saved kind of the best for last, the fan favorite for last, the front runner for last. And of course, like I mentioned, it just led with that big blow up, which we'll discuss as well. But I think Greg definitely had the most touching, most quality hometown visit and just the most fun I feel like Katie has had with any of the 3 of the guys that are left. And I just think, yeah, the quality was just so much more natural. And again, just connecting both on their fathers not being in their lives anymore and just the emotions that were there when Katie was speaking to Greg's mom. And I'm sure she saw some similarities when Katie would speak to her own mom in regards to both of them losing their fathers in that situation and that time in their lives. So I think it was just a lot of relatability, the most I've seen in any relationship that Katie has been in. And it was solid until, of course, they had that moment where Greg confessed and just kind of, opened up the floodgates of emotion and just kind of surrendered himself to Katie. I think everything leading up to that point was just kind of flawless. I mean, Greg was smiling. He was so happy and giddy and smitten, all the things that you want to see. And then Katie, of course, just kind of put a stop to it right away and just kind of put up her guards. So I think as far as that, as more of like on a topical level, I think, of course, Greg delivered. And then I'd have to put Blake in second place. And then Justin, unfortunately, is last for me.
Yeah, definitely. No, I totally agree. I think I was excited for Blake's hometown because, I really thought they were going to get along super well. It seems like she did mesh with the mom and sister. But was still disappointed he didn't, kind of man up a little bit more and take the initiative to say that, I love you, because that would have just sort of made him stand out a little bit more in her eyes, in my
Mhm.
eyes, in all of Bachelor Nation's eyes. But, you know, everything you said about Greg's hometown was totally true as well. Let's talk about even some more of the details now. I was personally shocked about how everything played out, even though we did have some idea that this was going to happen, but still pretty shocking. So, Greg's hometown date, of course, again, went very well. We met his mom, his brother, his best friend, and even his sisters through a video. Greg himself teared up multiple times from all the overwhelming good emotions of it all. And he felt so ready to tell Katie that he loved her and that she was the one. Like you were saying, Hiba, everyone was saying, we've never seen Greg this happy before. And it's just like, okay, wow, this has to be it. That has to be it, right? Well, unfortunately, it took a turn after that. The worst happened. Katie tried to keep her cards very close to her chest and didn't say I love you back or even really give any sort of positive reaction to Greg, which then immediately made him start to doubt everything. So, kind of crazy how this ended up playing out, but this is something we really need to dive into, Hiba. A big question that a lot of people are probably talking about right now. What did you think of Katie's reaction? Because a lot of people are saying Katie gave him nothing. They're on Greg's side. Or some people are saying, what is Katie supposed to say? She can't really say that she loves him. She kind of can't express too much. Is Greg being too hard on her, or is just this whole thing a very strategic, almost bad edit of Katie? Did she give a little bit more that we didn't see and they kind of just edited that out to create this very dramatic storyline? A lot of different, layers happening here, but I just want to get some of your reactions on this moment.
Yeah, I mean, we of course all saw Greg just pouring his heart and soul out to her on that sofa when they were sitting and speaking, and tears were running. I mean, he brought his dad into the conversation and said that Katie fills that empty part of when he lost his father. And I
Mhm.
mean, let alone like, what are you going to say to that? Because that is such a huge statement. And, as he's saying that, of course, tears are running down his face. It's a very, very vulnerable and emotional moment. And that takes a lot for Greg to say because, like when Katie was speaking to Greg's brother, his brother said that they even themselves haven't talked much about their own father. And now Greg is, opening up to Katie about it. So that's huge. That's a huge step. So
Mhm.
it definitely is a big deal when Greg talks about his father so openly and so casually, especially to Katie, and so emotionally. And so when he mentioned his father and that he was falling in love with her and that you're the one for me, it was like basically like crickets on Katie's side. And Greg kept saying like what do you have to say to that? Like what's your reaction? Like what are you thinking? And Katie just said like I just can't stop staring at you. Like that's all she could come up with. And I don't know if that was genuinely what she said or again if it was what we blame on the bad edit, but nonetheless, it was just very awkward and again, just very crickets and very silent and just what you don't expect someone to say, or that's all they have to say after someone's poured their heart and soul out to you, especially since Greg has been the front runner. Katie has said it. They've had 2 one-on-one dates together, which is unheard of in this show. So I feel like Katie could still have given him more without having to say I love you because she had made that pact to herself that she didn't want to say until the last person stood there with her at the end. So I get it. She
Yeah.
made that pact. She wasn't going to say I love you, but she still could have said something that was still a little bit more reassuring and didn't question that he was giving up on the relationship. And of course, I feel like that really got taken out of context and Greg just got really offended and just kind of ran with it and really didn't hear her explanation edgewise and just kind of, had the blinders on and just kind of blamed Katie a little bit. And I also
Yeah.
feel like Greg should have understood the position that Katie is in. She is the lead. She has to kind of, weigh out all her options. She can't just, still at the final 3, take someone's word for it and kind of run with it home. She still has to, again, weigh out all her options. And I feel like Greg just kind of had to be a little bit more respectable to that because she is put in a tough position. You kind of know what you signed up for, especially when you would make it further and further and further in this journey. It was going to get harder. You're going to have to see her kissing other guys, meeting other people's as families. So unfortunately, I just feel like Greg fell so hard and so quick and was so vulnerable so fast that he had to made it blow up in his own face as well. And again, there's both sides to this. There's definitely both pros and cons. So it's hard to say kind of who's the villain and who's the hero in this situation. So that's kind of where I stand. But what are your thoughts, Gabby, on the whole way this hometown went down?
Yeah, that was very well said, Hiba. I totally agree. Lots to like dissect on both sides. I think it's so interesting how they did edit Katie though, because they really made it
Mhm.
seem like, Greg was kind of ripping her apart, and that's a little bit what we're going to talk about next. But they really edited it so, like, like, Katie as the Bachelorette lead was, like, kind of in the wrong, which is, like, kind of it seems unheard of because, like, this is her
Yeah,
show, to get a bad edit as the Bachelorette is kind of crazy, but I kind of, like that because, um, in the past, they always edit it where the Bachelorette or, like, the lead is, the star, and it's all about them, they can do no wrong, and it's their choice and all that, but it's like, no, this is actually, like, a two-way street. If Greg doesn't feel like he's getting enough out of this relationship, or if she's kind of falling short, like, yeah, even though you're the lead, this is your show, like, you can totally fall short in a relationship and not really respond correctly or like handle a situation perfectly. So I kind of found that refreshing a little bit in this edit. Um, and just totally also feel for both sides though, and how weird it was for Greg to see Katie really give him nothing, like you were saying. And I really feel like Katie, as the Bachelorette, she did make that promise to herself. Okay, like, I'm not gonna say I love you because I wanna save that for the person at the end. But then it's like, okay, if you mess this up with Greg, there isn't gonna be a person at the end, So she's like
yeah,
saving this big moment of, I'm gonna say I love you to my final guy. And it's like, well, you have this great guy who you've pretty much loved from the start, and now he's saying he loves you. And just because you, like, had this weird, promise to yourself that you were gonna wait to the end, it's like, no, this is now, like, the moment's happening now. It's not how
yeah,
you planned it. Because sometimes life is, like, not exactly how you plan everything out. I feel like Katie's, like, a very, strict planner person, but you have to kinda, like, be more flexible in the moment and realize, like, I don't know, does that make sense kind of? I don't know, but,
yeah.
so I feel
Yeah, it
like
does
in that.
definitely because I feel like she was more sticking to her script of, like, having this pact to herself, and I feel like in the moment, when hometowns come up and you meet your families, that can change in an instant whether you're attracted to a person or not. So I feel like she was kinda maybe holding herself up to this standard of, like, "No, I kinda wanna keep this in between the lines," and that kind of ended up screwing her up at the end, hence why Greg left, so it kinda blew up in her face too. So it's like, "Ah, who do I side with?"
Yeah, exactly. So kind of crazy. I feel like, yeah, in that moment, because she had those strict rules on herself, she didn't even know what to say. Normally, even from Matt James, we always gotta, thank you for sharing that with me. She didn't
Yeah.
even really, she didn't say that. She didn't like start a makeout sesh. It was just like nothing. So I could see from Greg's perspective how that would be a little off-putting. Of course, the next day, Greg goes to see Katie in her room. He wants to address his concerns, sort of talk everything out. It seems like he's going in with the intent of leaving though, because he's just really upset about everything that happened. Of course, they try to hash everything out. There were some miscommunications, but then Greg does get heated and completely storms out. Katie chases him down, although it's, more of like a slow walk rather than a chase down. It seemed like Katie was running even faster to go chase Andrew S. when he was leaving down the
Yeah.
stairwell. So it was like, well, I thought Greg was like your man, and here you are just kind of strolling around. That was just a random, fact that we pointed out. And then, of course, she kind of goes to Greg. They try to talk it out a little bit more, but Greg's just really not budging and decides to leave because he doesn't really feel like there's anything Katie can say at this point to change his mind. So I thought another interesting point was that once Greg was deciding to leave, Katie was kind of wrapping her brain around it. She said something to the effect of like, if you leave, I'm going to leave because I've always said this whole time, if Greg leaves, like, I don't want to do this anymore. And I thought that was interesting because it's like, okay, well then like does that mean he's your pick and like the one that you want?
Yeah.
Because if he left but you still had something amazing with Blake or even Michael A or other people, like why would you want to leave? Why was Greg like that one person keeping her here? And if he was, then like just drop everything and like leave with him. So that was like, I don't know. I thought that was super weird. What do you think of that moment?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if Blake had left or if Justin had left, I don't think her reaction would have been anywhere close to how it was when Greg left. I mean, we saw how just kind of distraught she was and how she was just fighting for him, literally sitting on the ground next to him as he still unfortunately walked away and was just completely done. She was still, left a mess. She broke. She said, book my flight home. I'm done. I can't do this anymore. Locked herself in the bathroom. So I think you brought a great point. If it was Greg the whole time and you're reacting like this, why didn't you just cut to the chase? Why string him along? Why string the others along when it seems like you're so hung up on him? Why not just, cut it right then and there and just say Greg was the one. He's always been the one. Just admit it. We've
Mhm.
all seen it. We can see it, a mile away. Why make
Uh-huh.
it such a mess? But again, I understand that she wants to weigh out all her options, and I feel like that's the safe and smart thing to do. But based on the way that she reacted, why not just, say it's Greg? When you're reacting like this, wanting to quit the show, wanting to go home, wanting to give up so easily on the other guys that are left over that you decided to also bring along. So it's again that argument of what is she doing? Why is she wasting the other guys' time when it was basically Greg the whole time and she was willing to just drop everything at the drop of a hat so easily for him. So it's just very
Mhm.
conflicting and I don't know who to side with because it's so like wishy-washy it seems like.
Yeah, definitely. I think that is a great point because I think Katie sort of had the mindset that, like, oh, I'm the bachelorette and it's my decisions. And, I hope these guys are here for me. But ultimately, like, I can weigh all my options and then decide at the end who's best and who I think I want. But, I don't think she ever thought that it would get to the point where Greg was threatening to leave and then
Yeah.
going to leave. And so I feel like now that all of this happened, it's almost going to be like you don't realize what you have until it's gone. So that's why I feel like next week in the finale is really going to be hard for her because she's really going to say, wow, like Greg isn't an option for me anymore. And like that wasn't my choice. What do I do now? So maybe, that will make her fight for Greg a little bit more. Maybe he comes back. I don't know. Of course, Katie told Caitlin, in the bathroom, she wanted to book her flight home. It looks like
Yeah.
that doesn't necessarily happen because we do see some clips of her back next week. But what do you think? Is she really going to leave? Is she going to quit the season early? Will Greg ever come back? I mean, we did see that memoriam montage of all of Katie and
Yeah.
Greg's, like, best moments at the end of the episode, so it almost seems like, he had left the show, passed on, and we were, like, remembering him, so I honestly don't see him coming back since they kinda threw that in there, but yeah, what do you think's gonna happen after this?
I do think she might go home because again, we do see that conversation and that sit down that she has with her mom. But location wise, I wasn't too sure whether they might have flew her mom out to the resort or whether Katie ended up going home. So I feel like that's still up in the air. Or maybe they tried to, meet her halfway and have her mom just fly out just so she can kind of get that comfort from no other than her mother herself. Maybe logistically wise, they couldn't fly Katie home, maybe with quarantine rules and COVID going on. So at the time, so maybe they couldn't schedule that out logistically. But I think as far as, that whole situation of just it getting blown up in her face, I think it's possible to be in love with multiple people, but it doesn't mean that they're always going to be right for you. And it just seems like, again, always based off that reaction of how she reacted, locking herself in the bathroom, just wanting to quit. It seemed like, again, Greg was the strongest relationship this whole time and it blew up in her face. And now she's realizing it. And I don't know if the edit kind of maybe mixed it up for us in regards to maybe how hard she might have fallen for him because it just seemed like she did try to keep her guard up as much as possible. And again, wanted to weigh out all those options, but is it really worth it to weigh out all those options when you're gonna miss out on the option that was endgame? So again, it's
Yeah.
just very like, girl, was it worth it? So again, she made that pact, but it just again blew up in her face, and now it seems like she might have to settle with Blake or just go home still single and not engaged.
Yep, those are all great points. I think we're all very excited to see how everything plays out next week. Katie ended her season filming early. It's going to be interesting to pack all of this ending into next week's episode, but definitely excited to check that out on Monday. Of course, we'll be back with a recap, you guys. That's all we have for this hometowns recap, specifically talking about Greg and everything that happened with that breakup. So crazy, one of the major episodes of this season. So of course we want to know your thoughts. Let us know down in the comments. What did you think of this Greg breakup? Whose side are you more on? There's definitely, pros and cons to both sides as we were talking about in this video. Let us know your thoughts about Greg and Katie. and what you think is going to go down next week, she might end up with. Definitely let us know. And before you go, make sure you subscribe to our channel and ring the bell so you don't miss out on any future videos or our recap coming next week. As always, I'm your host, Gabby Ganta, and I was joined by Hiba Berry today. You can follow us at our social handles on the screen. Come say hi and we'll chat all things Greg and Katie. Thanks so much, and we'll see you guys next time.